The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I'm VP of Marketing here with Optimal Strategics Group, and I want to welcome you to our webinar about understanding and engaging patients in the new patient-centric landscape. It will be presented by Mark DiCongilio, who has a significant amount of experience in driving patient-centered engagements for us. And I'll let Mark introduce himself in a little bit here. So thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And we're very excited to share the material with you today. So I wanted to let you know that we will be pausing for questions about halfway through the presentation, and we will be also taking questions at the end of the presentation as well. So if you have something you'd like to share, we do have a couple of built-in places for you to do so we can continue with the material and make sure we're using everyone's time efficiently. So with that, I'd like to turn the forum over to Mark DiCongilio, and we'll get into how you can thrive in a patient-centric healthcare landscape.
Thank you, Corey. I'm excited to speak with you all this morning about a topic we're very passionate about here at OSG, and that is patient centricity. As Corey said, I've done my fair share of consumer work over my 15-year career in pharmaceutical market research. This includes qualitative, patient journey work, ATUs, message recall, typical types of consumer work, you name it, it's been done, as I'm sure many of you have as well. I think we can all agree that the importance of consumer input and direction into the prescribing decision has increased and will continue to increase in the future. And today we're going to discuss that dynamic and how to harness the power of the patients. So I'll start first by talking about some of the forces that are driving change among healthcare consumers. We'll then transition to the need for a customer-centric marketing approach and how we get there with market research. And we'll close by talking about how we at OSG can apply our approach to drive patient centricity, and I'll highlight two recent case studies. So there's been a number of factors in recent years reshaping the healthcare landscape here in the U.S. I consider the two at the top of your screen the most influential at this point. First, technology. The internet and social media have connected patients to each other and really an array of endless medical information. The so-called the doctor internet, where patients can self-diagnose and question physicians' diagnoses and suggested treatment algorithms. It's really opened up a whole new world of decision points for consumers. Secondarily, the Affordable Care Act, or ACA. And the impact here isn't just on patients, but it's on all stakeholders, caregivers, physicians, payers. Everyone is still adjusting and will continue adjusting over time to the new reality. And with the ACA, there are many more forces at play, many more dynamics, either preventing or driving patient decision-making a certain way. On the bottom, awareness of preventative care is becoming more and more prevalent, really working to increase the knowledge base of patients and allowing them to feel more of a sense of ownership with their healthcare decisions. And then finally, healthcare is popping up in new places, and not just the metastatic clinics we see in strip malls nowadays, but you can obtain prescriptions from stores like Walgreens and Target. So not only do patients have many more choices to make, but they have more places to actually make them. Essentially, there's a lot of information at the fingertips of consumers in a dynamic space. And what this all leads to is a more empowered consumer. Patients are essentially making more and more of their own choices when they choose to obtain a certain route for healthcare. And it's only going to get more and more complex in the future with more and more choices as patients choose to personalize their experience, a la wearables and smartphones. So the implications of this new reality is that in order to win, healthcare marketers need to broaden their understanding to develop strategies that will effectively drive patient choice. Put simply, patient-centered marketing is the only way forward. And I believe this to be true in every therapeutic area, even those traditionally dominated by HCPs, at least to some point. So I think this all makes sense. I don't think any of this is new to anyone here. But the question is, if we're all aware of this, how come we aren't doing it? And I think the answer is that we're trying, but we lack the breadth of understanding in order to do so. Now, when we talk about market research, we find that traditional primary research approaches are really insufficient to capture the extensive range of choices that now exist within the current and future decision-making process. They're insufficient to provide the depth of understanding we really need to achieve a patient-centric view. So what happens is marketers are reacting to only part of the landscape, and they're coming up with communication strategies that aren't as effective as they had planned. Essentially, they find themselves spinning their wheels, trying to get ahead, because they don't have all the information, and it limits their ability to be effective. My colleague Corey is going to initiate a short poll amongst the audience now in order to assess how much you agree with this statement, how much you find as well that you're not reacting to all of the decision points that consumers have to make. So while he's doing that, what do we need to do? Let's start from the top down by first defining what customer centricity means. And I may say customer, consumer, or patient. It does all mean the same. I'm meaning to mean all the same thing here. Patient centricity. We've all heard it. So what does it mean exactly? And here we see a quote from a close friend of OSG, Dr. Peter Fader from Wharton. I'll let you have a quick look at that. Essentially, it's about understanding and aligning your organization to your customers' current and future needs, and prioritizing which customers to target in order to maximize growth. And it's a fundamental change that impacts not just the marketing function, but also sales, even research or development. So tactically, to move from the old school product-centric mentality to a truly customer-centric mentality, you need an approach that helps you understand all the dimensions that affect the patient decision-making process and how to target and influence the right segments of patients in the right way. And that is how you move from being product-centric to truly customer-centric. All right. So let's take a quick pause here. We're about halfway through what I want to get through. And I want to know if there's any questions that we can help out at this time.
Mark, I'm ready to share the results of our first poll if you'd like me to do so.
Oh, great.
So it looks like most of our attendees would say some of the time we're not taking the entire decision-making process into account during research. So it seems like a happier state for some, but definitely some issues with most of the time.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and assume that at least part of the time, right, that you're going to feel like, hey, we're missing something, we're not including these aspects, and they are important, but you know what, we only have room in our research for X, Y, and Z. We don't have room for A and B. So based on what we know and just internal discussions, we can't really pursue what angles we may be able to take with those decision points. But that's really where this approach comes in. And our approach is called ACEMAP. It's our proprietary quantitative methodology. And it's been designed from the ground up to deliver the best understanding of how customers make choices. And I'm not going to go through all the details of the approach. We can absolutely set up time afterwards to walk you through how we may be able to apply it to your specific business situation. I'd like to just give a very high-level overview. I want to jump right into the case studies. So what is it and how does it work? Well, it's a conjoint approach developed out of Stanford University by one of our founding fathers and published in the AMA's Journal of Marketing Research. Essentially, what we have respondents do is come into the survey and do some ranking exercises based on all the decision points they need to make, all the choice drivers. And then we get into what you see in the bottom right of your screen. We call these the pairwise comparisons. So based on the ranking exercise, we have consumers then tell us head-to-head in a comparison how much more important one choice driver is versus another choice driver. And it's not just which is more important, which is less important. They actually have to allocate 100 points So it produces a wealth of data by the time we go through 10 or 12 of these screens. And the way that the data are collected in this approach allows you two key tactical advantages when you're trying to get more customer-centric. First, you're able to test more attributes than traditional approaches. And that enables you to understand that wide variety of factors that are influencing consumer choice. You're also able to utilize smaller sample sizes, so you're able to understand the influence of different segments of your patient population. And these are, it may sound kind of simple when we break it down like that in terms of those two key features, but those are two key features that really move us more towards that truly customer-centric understanding. All right? It helps our marketers identify the entire range of decision points and the best levers to pull in order to influence choice, as well as recognizing the right customers to target in the most meaningful way. Right? And these are, as per Dr. Fader's definition of customer centricity, the two key elements in order to get more customer-centric. Okay? So based on that, Corey's going to initiate another short poll that will ask you a bit about some of the approaches you may have used in the past and whether they're able to handle all the attributes without requiring an extremely large sample size. I think that's part of the key. Especially in smaller patient populations and even rare disease, you're not going to have 300 patients to survey. Okay. So while he's doing that, let's talk about our two case studies. And the first one is one I'm particularly excited about because it was my study. I was the engagement lead on this particular project. It's a prescription category, but heavily driven by consumers. Consumers, much more so in many categories, really drive decision-making in the market. It was my client's product and really one main competitor, and then all of a sudden, two more competitors came in. So there were then four competitors within the market, none of which were really differentiated from each other in any meaningful way. None of them were growing. And my client found this to be an opportunity to reposition themselves vis-a-vis the other three competitors. And they came to us specifically for AceMap. They knew they had a lot of messages to test in all different types of categories, and they really wanted to see, okay, if we could put everything in there, the entire decision-making process, what's going to pop? So we did a round of qual to make sure that the respondents were understanding all of the different choice drivers or messages, and then we went into a quantitative approach online. And what we found, you know, to respect my client's confidentiality, I can't tell you what it is, but we'll call it safety category X. We had a couple attributes that we tested on safety category X, and they came very close to the top in terms of importance, after some of the efficacy measures, as you probably can imagine. And what was really interesting about it was that our client's product, we also tested perceptions, also had a perceived advantage within safety category X. So not only is it very important, but it's ownable for our client. And at the end of the project, the senior director of the market research department came up to me and said, listen, you know, finding out that safety category X was this important and now we're able to own it is completely new to us. And it's the cornerstone of what we're taking forward in our repositioning effort with our ad agency. So for me personally, that was very hard-hitting and great to hear the power when you truly understand the entire customer decision-making process. You're able to identify some of these types of nuances that you're able to use to better differentiate yourself. Okay? And the second case study is a segmentation for an oral treatment that was being launched into a well-established disease state with really many well-performing treatment options. And while some degree of unmet therapeutic need existed, many patients considered their disease to be well managed with the existing medications. So it was our client's mandate to find a way to better differentiate their drug. And they partnered with us to conduct qualitative as well as quantitative research to segment their patients, and understand what's really going to drive choice in each of those different segments. And that is what we produced. Okay? The outcome was a deep and accurate understanding of how the different patient groups make choices and how to influence those choices. Segments were actually prioritized as targets, whether they were a short, medium, or long-term growth initiative. The client actually put together a patient-centric vocabulary that was implemented across all customer-serving functions. And the product launch and the patient programs were tailored to target segments, and they were adapted for each of the different segments based on what was really going to drive choice within each of those different groups. So again, highly actionable insights were generated by OSG and ACEMAP in this particular case. So I'm wondering, Corey, do we have the results of that latest poll? Corey, we can't hear you if you are...
Oh, sorry about that. I just unmuted. Yeah, so interesting. So it seems like we have a very similar approach, and I think what would be interesting to hear when we get to the discussion portion of the session is what those approaches are and if people are willing to share their experience with them.
That would be great. So before we get into the discussion, I'd like to close this part of the webinar with a quote. All truths are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them. And it's not a quote by a marketing guru, it's actually by the astronomer Galileo. And I chose it because it sums up nicely what needs to be done in order to become more patient-centric. And that is to uncover and understand the entire patient decision-making process. Because when you can see the whole picture, you're going to be much more effective in marketing to them. Thank you. Let's open up the floor to questions at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about some of the other approaches that folks are using to obtain that deep understanding of the patient decision-making process.
Yeah, and just to make sure everyone knows, there are a couple of different ways you can hit with questions, obviously verbally, but also you can type in using the question dialog box on the control panel of GoToWebinar.
Are all the folks off unmuted?
Okay, why don't we give it another half minute here, but it seems that we've covered what we need to cover.
Great, great. And does anyone have any other thoughts, anything top of mind that comes up in terms of, again, the patient decision-making process, why it's so complex nowadays, and what we need to do to understand it and leverage what we know to more effectively market to them? Happy to discuss.
Yeah, and we will be following up with this presentation so that you have it for your reference. And if you do have further questions, as Mark said, you can be contacted there below. And we look forward to discussing any needs that you have moving forward with how we can help you to thrive in a patient-centered landscape.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining.
Yes.